Welcome to Football Conspiracies.
I'm Jared Cole.
And I'm Jared Rabinovich.
This week's episode, the NFL is not a sport.
J. Cole, you got anything for the masses today?
Yeah, something really interesting happened on Twitter this week, and I think our listeners deserve to know it.
Stands out as interesting on Twitter this week? Man, Twitter has been the most interesting place this week.
Okay, so this guy, @MasterCiv, he created this tweet. Interesting. This is now Jared Goff's 7th career game with at least 4 interceptions. His record in those games, 6-0.
Wait, what?
Does Goff have the Texans right where he wants them? This was the tweet. Crazy, right?
Sure, that's just absolutely insane.
Absolutely insane. The next day on the Pat McAfee show, Aaron Rodgers was on, and he decided to bring up this stat when talking about Jared Goff.
Amazing stat, though. Is this a true stat that he's done 4 more picks 7 times and he's won every single one of those games? Is that real?
Yep, 7-0.
That's wild.
Yeah, so is this a true stat?
Okay, well, first of all, just
One sec.
first thoughts right off the bat, my boy Aaron Rodgers is speaking like Joe Biden at the beginning of that clip. Like, that's craziness.
Yeah, well, I mean,
It is Aaron Rodgers, yeah.
Yeah, so @MasterCiv came out the next day when he saw this Pat McAfee thing and said, if you ever wondered how easy it is to spread fake information, I made this stat up while laying in bed at halftime of the game.
Okay, yeah, obvious. That makes so much more sense now. Thank you. Oh my god. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers just got absolutely taken for a ride.
Yeah, there's also a Twitter community note on Civ's original tweet saying that Jared Goff has thrown 4+ interceptions in only 2 of his NFL career games, and he is 1-1. Now he is 2-1.
Wow, thank you to the community, first
Yeah.
of all. And damn, like that just shows you exactly the sort of bullshit that Aaron Rodgers will just take for gospel. Like, if anything is gonna make you,
I will say in that video, he did say, is this true? Repeated the stat, and then Pat McAfee went, yes, he is 7-0. So, I mean, it's a little on Pat McAfee, too.
absolutely on Pat McAfee. I'll give him that. But I mean, those two together is just like a cesspool of conspiracy.
Oh my god, they give the best content.
Oh, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I'm entertained beyond belief. But if you were to take all the things that they said for gospel, you too would be as crazy as Aaron Rodgers.
It's pretty hard to do.
You don't
Even
say.
even if you took all that as gospel, it would still be hard to be Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because NFL player, but
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's a side point.
yeah. So what do you have for us?
All right, so I got, as usual, a bit of a weird episode today. It feels like that's kind of the pattern these days, but what I have for you is less of a conspiracy as we'd usually be talking about, and more of an overarching explanation for why there are so many conspiracies in the NFL.
Okay.
I know that sounds a little weird right now, but it'll make sense in a minute. Throughout this podcast, I believe there has been one overarching theory that seems like what can only be described as an invasive species when it comes to NFL conspiracy theories. J. Cole, you have any idea what I'm referring to?
No, I don't even have any place to start guessing.
That totally makes sense. Just gotta ask. Similar to how many conspiracy theories lead back to the Illuminati or the Freemasons or a handful of other esoteric groups that seem to be consistently at fault in the minds of conspiracists, the NFL actually has its own version of these groups. After all, when it comes to NFL conspiracies, there are only so many parties that could be at fault, namely the league itself, the commissioner, the refs, the media, and occasionally players and coaches. But that does not mean that there is not a common thread that is often tugged on by the brave researchers of NFL conspiracy. This thread is the theory that the NFL is scripted, or otherwise rigged in a systematic way.
Yeah, I've heard that once or twice.
Exactly. It's really one of the main, if not the main motivator for us creating this podcast in the first place.
Yeah.
Just all the craziness that went on, particularly, I would say, last season.
I mean, you look at the first episode of our podcast, and we literally talked about how the NFL is scripted based on the Super Bowl logos.
Of course.
Like we've been talking about this since the beginning.
Exactly. Like, I mean, for anyone who's a loyal listener of this podcast, you've likely heard the two of us speak about the NFL being scripted countless times. It comes up in most of our episodes, I would say.
Yeah.
It is just the mothership of all these conspiracy theories. It's the umbrella theory that all of these fit under. This has become a bit of a rallying cry for NFL conspiracy theorists over the past couple of years, and the NFL isn't doing a great job in fending it away, actually playing into it with their commercials with Keegan-Michael Key acting like he's the director of the NFL, which personally I quite enjoy.
Yeah, they're great commercials. I mean,
No complaints.
No complaints at all. The
Exactly.
Kelseys are hilarious in them.
Absolutely, and if you're making some money off of this bullshit conspiracy, feel free, NFL.
Yeah, exactly.
They do way scummier things all the time. This I would consider one of their, more benevolent acts.
Oh, for sure.
But either way, this theory has become so pervasive that it has broken out of conspiracy circles and has simply become a topic of conversation among NFL fans, albeit one that most fans talk about pretty jokingly.
No one who I've actually talked to really believes that the NFL is scripted, but they know that it's there.
Exactly. I think most of my friends that I've spoken to about this, they like the joke about it, they think it's funny, but no one I've spoken to genuinely believes this. But as we know from doing research for this podcast,
People do.
absolutely. There are a plethora of reasons people believe the NFL is scripted. Because of this, it should be no surprise that there are abundance of quote-unquote proofs theorists have compiled in an effort to prove their point and pill the masses. Well, maybe the masses have fallen into this grand facade, but this guy ain't the masses. I'm far more annoying than the masses.
That is true.
Listeners of this podcast will know. The vast majority of people who come across this theory, at least anecdotally, probably chuckle and quickly move on to the next. But a small but vocal minority clings to the theory and expounds on it, creating a never-ending conspiracy churn that has come to provide us with all the juicy content that we bring to our listeners' ear holes each week. An even smaller minority chooses to create a podcast to debunk these theories and ruin the fun for everyone involved. Congratulations, you have found that even smaller minority. All this being said, we are not here to speak about the NFL scripted conspiracy theory today. That topic deserves a multi-part series all on its own. There's simply far too much content on the subject for one episode to suffice. Even a multi-part series will only begin to scratch the surface of that. Instead, we are going to speak about what I believe is the main reason why this theory exists in the first place. The why as opposed to the what.
Valid.
I believe this episode will be instructive for anyone trying to gain a grasp of the origins of this theory or why so many people wholeheartedly buy into it. While this is going to be a far from complete explanation as to why the NFL scripted conspiracy theory has garnered so much popularity in recent years, I think this is a good place to start our journey into this topic. It is also useful for my personal purposes, as this explanation seems to pervade the collective consciousness of NFL conspiracists in an infectious manner. Think about the proverbial invasive species I referred to earlier. This is the best analogy I can think of to explain this brain bug. Many theorists I've come across while doing research for past episodes have made reference to this, and I think it is finally time to speak about this. The reasons for me doing this now are twofold. One reason is magnanimous. I think it will serve the audience well to know the backbone of so many of the theories we discuss on the show. The other reason is selfish. It will be so much easier for me to speak about some of these theories if I can just tell people to listen back to this episode for a more in-depth explanation instead of doing it each and every time this comes up.
That's fair. This is your more in-depth explanation.
Exactly. Welcome. So, J. Cole, now that I've expanded on this a little bit, do you have any clue what I'm going on about?
I would think that this is... No, nothing behind this. I think that the origins of the NFL is rigged comes all the way back to like the 1890 something when like when football was first beginning and they were just rigging games left, right, and center.
Okay, I actually think that's a completely fair argument. It's not what we're here to discuss today, and it's something that deserves more research, but You're probably right to some extent. There was a lot of, fuckery in the early NFL, and it does not bode well for the history or what people believe the rest of the league has turned out to be. I understand why you went there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Especially as the person who does a lot more NFL history research than I do.
Yeah. So what is it?
Well, first I want to tell you the reason I'm speaking about this, and particularly this week. And that's because when I was doing research on the magnetic glove theory, which is last week's episode...
last two weeks'
episodes. When I was doing research for them, I came across a thread on a forum called Seahawks.net. The thread is titled, NFL using magnetic gloves, ? Texans? I know, it's horribly named. Very catchy title, but that's just what it's called. Sorry. Well, the video being discussed on the thread is no longer available. Based on the descriptions, it sounds like the one we discussed last week, where the player catches an interception and pretends like he can't get the ball out of his hand like a celly. You remember that?
Yeah.
Exactly, like the reference to the Replacements movie.
Yeah.
Obviously, the implication is that the player's gloves are magnetic, based on the forum I was in. For anyone wondering, they are not. And for a more thorough breakdown of this, check out last week's episode. But what's important to me about this thread is not the original poster's content. Rather, I care far more about a single comment left in the response to it. The comment is left by a poster with the user named Roland Deschain. First of all, before we get further, I don't actually want to roast this person, and it's for one really simple reason: his username. For those who aren't familiar, Roland Deschain is the name of the main character of the Dark Tower series written by Stephen King. I absolutely adore this series, and would far rather be on the side of someone who clearly feels the same way. But evidently, that is not what Ka is asking of me today. Sorry, another reference. Obviously, I digress. The comment left by Roland Deschain says this.
Since the NFL is not classified as a sport, but sport entertainment like wrestling, it doesn't surprise me at all.
He's responding to the accusations that the glove was magnetic.
Yes.
So, J. Cole, have you ever come across anything like this since we begun the podcast?
I will say that it actually is something I'm familiar with because a couple years ago, I don't want to get the year wrong, so I'm not going to name it, but very recent history, it was the Chargers and I want to say the Raiders. They were dueling for the final spot, and they had that final week game, and if either team won, then they were going.
They'd get the playoff
then
spot,
they would
yeah.
get the playoff spot, and it was fourth quarter, field goal, dying seconds, crazy game. But before that, everyone was oh, the NFL's going to script it to be a tie so that both teams can get into the playoffs. And then knock out the third team.
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah, and this was their explanation. It was sport entertainment, not sport.
Exactly. This is a very pervasive theory. And personally, I have seen this exact claim countless times. It seems that when you follow any NFL conspiracy theory far enough down the rabbit hole, you will inevitably end up back in this place. The logic appears to be something like this. Something sketchy happens in the NFL. Because of this, people begin theorizing about why this could have happened. Eventually, theorists assume that if this was inorganic, which that always ends up being the assumption, then the league must be scripted. Because the league is scripted, and they openly admit it to us, it must be because the NFL is classified as entertainment and not a sport. Does that logical train make sense?
Yeah, the train's there. I mean, we talked last week about how logic and facts are
not the same, obviously. And I'm not going to get back into my description of why that's the case, but obviously this logic totally makes sense, but the facts behind it are utterly
ridiculous.
Flawed. Yes. So now, the next question for our purposes seems pretty obvious. Is the NFL actually classified as entertainment and not a sport? Do you happen to know?
No, I don't. I figure I want to say it's a sport because you can bet on it, but I don't know.
That's a good answer, because even after all this time of doing research for this podcast, I also had no idea. Unfortunately, there are very few, if any, reliable sources speaking about this issue. So we will simply need to work with what we got.
So is it even truth that it's sports entertainment, not sports.
We'll get there, my young pilgrim. Please, please. I do think it would be interesting for us to get in a legal scholar, potentially an American entertainment lawyer, who can shed some light on this topic. I know Doug Emhoff is recently out of work, so maybe he'd be gracious enough to lend his time to us. The best way I can answer this question, though, does seem to come from a Reddit comment. And please, before y'all come after me and tell me that this isn't a reliable source, I know that, but I'm just doing my best here. And if you do think that this is a bad source, which it is, and if you disagree with my conclusion because of this, it may be worth checking your sources, because the vast majority of people claiming the NFL is scripted entertainment are also people shooting off in Reddit comment sections.
Yeah.
So your source is no better than mine, buddy. We're really gonna have to be working on Trust Me, bro right now, okay? So the answer to the question, is the NFL classified as sport or entertainment? It might be surprising to find out that the NFL is in fact considered to be entertainment.
Wow.
Pretty shocking, right?
Okay, but that begs the question, are other sports considered that? Like,
That's a very good question. And the answer is yeah, for the most part. But using the word sport is wrong. NFL is entertainment. And let me get into this now. I think you're getting this now. So this answer on its surface obviously surprised me. But let's now defer to that Reddit comment I referenced earlier for an explanation as to why this may not be as worrying as it appears. In the words of u/Hurricane Stiz in the Reddit thread titled, "Why is the NFL classified as entertainment and not sport?" J. Cole, will you do the honors of reading this beautiful and succinct comment?
The NFL is not a sport. Football is a sport.
Thank you, Hurricane Stiz. That was perfect. Beautiful. That makes sense, right?
A perfect sense. In that case, the logic is also factual.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You understand. So, yeah, upon reading this, it made complete sense to me. Of course, the NFL is not a sport. The league is an entertainment entity that puts on football games, which in turn are a sport. Therefore, games cannot be rigged, as football is absolutely still a sport. The reason this topic is so important does not end at the fact that, if true, millions of football fans, including the two of us, have been being duped for decades on end and will continue to be duped right after this podcast when we sit down to watch Thursday Night Football. This is because the NFL isn't just a form of entertainment. It is also a source of income for bettors and bookies. Additionally, the fact that sports betting on the NFL is legal and recognized by gambling regulators serves as the most definitive proof that the NFL is in fact not scripted.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to script something, you couldn't be able to bet on it, because then people would just bet on who's ever gonna win, you know?
Exactly. Like, there would be some sort of insider trading going on. There'd likely be more players low-key betting on their own teams or against their own teams. And also just the fact that there have been so many betting scandals in the past where players have thrown games, I think just throws an even bigger wrench into this theory. Why would I need to bet on against myself and throw a game if the game was scripted to begin with? I wouldn't need to throw.
Exactly. The game's scripted. Exactly, yeah.
It's one thing to put on a facade of athleticism as entertainment. The WWE is a perfect example of this. But there's one major distinction between the NFL and the WWE. Gambling regulators have banned betting on the WWE, as it is scripted and does not qualify as a sport under the regulations.
Yeah, I mean, their whole thing is pretty narrative-driven, so it makes sense why you wouldn't be able to bet on it.
Exactly. But okay, and before anyone gets on my case about this, yes, I know you can bet on the WWE.
Oh,
but you cannot bet on the WWE on betting sites that are recognized as legitimate by federal gambling regulators.
Oh, okay, so like those random-ass websites where you can bet, like, on the weather and shit.
That's exactly right. This is, like, literally the example I was gonna get. Like, this is the same way you can bet on the next person out of Survivor. But you cannot do this on Bet365 or your betting app of choice, right?
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense.
You can bet on whatever the hell you want. You can bet on who's going to win the next presidency, like as many, many people did. But that doesn't make it legal and regulated. It just means it's something you can do.
Well, actually, the presidency is regulated. Like you can legally bet on.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He's back in my day in 2016 when I was betting on the election. Damn, that shit was not legal, especially
you were
in the Great White
16.
North over here.
Right, you were 16.
No, I wasn't.
No,
allegedly.
Yeah.
So, J. Cole, at this point, have I done enough to convince you that the NFL is not scripted, or at the very least, that using this as a reason for why the NFL is scripted is a deeply flawed argument?
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize that, like, when you gave out that one sentence.
I know, like, you/Hurricane Stiz, like, put it perfectly. I wish I could have come up with it on my own. It's beautiful. Alright, so now in this case that we're on the same page, we're able to move on to my theory as to why so many people have adopted this stance and why it has become so popularized over the past few years. We are going to be diving into some legal explanation now, and I want to preface this with two things. One, I apologize to anyone who is completely bored by legalese. I completely understand this view, but I simply cannot do this topic justice without it. And two, I am not a lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. It is very possible there's going to be mistakes here, and I apologize in advance for it, and will ensure to include a correction at the beginning of the next episode if any are found. But for now, let's hope those 2 law classes I took during my undergrad do me some justice.
It's quite the experience.
I know, I'm basically a lawyer. In a 2010 case taken up by the U.S. Supreme Court called American Needle Inc. versus National Football League, the justices sought to answer the question of if all 32 NFL teams are considered separate legal entities with their own personal economic interests. In this case, American Needle, a seller of NFL merchandise, sued the NFL, claiming that the league did not have the right to license exclusively to one brand, as this would be a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, a piece of legislation aimed at preventing the creation of monopolies. The court held in a 9-0 decision that NFL teams are, in fact, distinct legal entities with their own economic interests and are, therefore, capable of conspiring and violating the Sherman Antitrust Act. This is actually not the case for the MLB. Interestingly enough, it is the case for the other 2 major sports leagues, but it is not the case for the MLB. This being the case, NFL teams are unable to fix games, and this would also be a violation of the Sherman Act. And let me just preface this, that does not mean MLB games can be rigged.
I was just about to say.
The reason they can't be rigged will become clear throughout. It's not just the Sherman Act that is stopping games from being rigged.
I mean, look at the Black Sox.
Yeah. So is this all making sense so far?
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Perfect. Where the confusion seems to leak in is the fact that the NFL does actually have some antitrust exemptions. During his presidency, JFK signed the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. This allowed the 4 American major sports leagues, the MLB, NBA, NHL, and NFL, to coordinate with one another in a way that would, under normal circumstances, be considered an antitrust violation. Generally, competitors of this nature would not be allowed to communicate and collaborate for their common benefit. However, in the case of Major League Sports, the American government thought it would make sense to make an exemption. Because of this exemption, the leagues are able to communicate about which days their games will be played and do their best to avoid overlap.
Yeah, have you ever seen the Lakers stadium when the Clippers used to play there, and then they also had a couple of concerts going that weekend, and it's crazy the turnaround they have to do. But I mean, they have to plan it somehow.
Exactly, and this is all to allow for that.
Yeah.
This arrangement, of course, benefits the league in a huge way, and all sports leagues in a huge way. But it also benefits sports fans. Because of this, we almost never have to worry about 2 important games in different leagues happening on the same day. Also because of this, Sundays have become the NFL's day, and all of us get to enjoy Red Zone and spend 7 hours a week with Scott Hansen.
Yeah, there's actually, I don't want to call it a law, because I don't know if it is a law, but legally they can't do, it's football, high school football on Fridays, and college football on Saturdays and NFL on Sundays, like they're legally not allowed to have NFL on Saturdays unless it's like exclusively given sort of vibe.
So from what I understand, it's not a law, it's not legislation,
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say.
it is a civil contract between the two of them,
Okay.
which makes it, quote unquote, against the law. They can get sued if they break that. And the only reason a contract like this is legal to begin with is because of this Broadcasting Act that was signed by JFK.
Okay, there you go.
So does all that make sense as to why? So I think that is the basic explanation as to why so many people have gotten confused with the difference between entertainment and sport and what that really means. People have thought that this antitrust exemption that was created by JFK is really an exemption to the Sherman Antitrust Act, which in turn would allow them to rig games legally. But that's absolutely not true.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because if the NFL could legally rig games, then technically all the other sports leagues could also technically rig games.
Absolutely.
But I mean, maybe they do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, like, this would
Dodgers
be
are fake World Series winners.
this would be a much grander conspiracy than before, but yes, that would be the case. And for all those who still have their doubts about the effect of this antitrust exemption, let me put you at ease. Section 4 of the Sports Broadcasting Act specifically says that this exemption does not allow for the fixing of games or collusion between teams. This is in addition to the anti-game fixing amendments in the NFL's constitution and the plethora of laws on the books preventing fixing in any place where betting is allowed. There's so many guardrails to make sure that this isn't allowed, that rigging isn't allowed, particularly because people have money on it, but also because this is just meant to be a fair league for our enjoyment. And I think the exemption brought by JFK was a great thing objectively, but subjectively, it has been blown completely out of proportion by conspiracy theorists and used as evidence as to why they are legally allowed to fix games.
And this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, like, I want to, yes, but I want to make this clear. This is a theory of mine. I have no idea if this is really where it came from, but I suspect the reason people cite the fact that the NFL is entertainment and not a sport as the reason the game is rigged is because of exactly this.
So what you're saying is this is a football conspiracy theory?
Yes, it is. Oh my god. I hate that you phrased it that way. Fuck. Wait, what does Pat say?
It's not just a theory. It's a football conspiracy theory.
There we go. Hell yeah. So, this brings us to the end of our discussion of whether the NFL is a sport or entertainment. For the most simple answer, and for those who don't feel inclined to listen to a 40-minute podcast on the subject, I still defer to the Reddit user, you/Hurricane Stiz, and his wise words, the NFL is not a sport, football is a sport.
Yeah, those are honestly words to live by.
Yes, that is like the best way to just detonate any conspiracy theorist reasoning for the league being scripted.
Yeah.
You know they're gonna make it there. If anyone in your life says that's scripted and they eventually make it here, I've provided you with the tools to completely disarm them. We will come back to this topic of the NFL being scripted on this podcast in the near future, but I think this episode does a good job of laying the groundwork. It also lays out the primary reason why so many people believe the NFL is rigged in the first place. I know this will likely be criticized by the scripted NFL theory fanatics, and I welcome that criticism. As I mentioned, this topic has little solid research behind it, and I would like my side of the argument to be backed up by a little more than a Reddit post. I invite anyone who disagrees with me to send us an email, fbconspiracies@gmail.com. We would love to discuss this topic further. Additionally, if there's anyone with legal training who can help parse this, I would love to help contribute to the first ever proper legal analysis of this topic. So please reach out. J. Cole, what do you think about this now that we've come to the end?
I think that, you know what? The NFL is scripted, but the football games probably aren't.
What does that even mean?
It's like the NFL's got their, like the NFL as, like, a business is scripted, like every
business is scripted?
Exactly,
Okay,
but that's
yeah,
what I mean.
Yeah, 100%.
But the football games aren't.
which
Well, probably aren't.
probably aren't.
I
Like,
gotta add the probably.
exactly. I mean, like, at this point, if they are scripted, like, get every single one of these men an Oscar. Like, they deserve it.
Oh, 100%.
Most wonderful acting I've ever seen in my life.
I mean,
like,
they've been-
Damar Hamlin, incredible performance.
Honestly, I think every actor and actress should put their body on the line like he does. Or Tua, like, come on, bro.
Exactly. Like, come on, man. Like, why aren't I seeing, like, Ryan Reynolds gear up and get destroyed in an NFL game?
Glenn Powell's doing a football movie. Chad Powers.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Glenn Powell's becoming a football player. So we actually are getting that.
All right. I guess so. This is the world we live in.
The NFL will be scripted. All right, Jared. I got a collection of some fun stats for you today that are just fucking stupid.
All right. I'm in.
Okay. The Seattle Seahawks have never lost an NFC championship game. But they have lost an AFC championship
Wait,
game.
what?
Well, they switched conferences.
When?
Way back when.
Yeah, before our time,
Yeah.
certainly. Yeah.
Bro, way before our time. But yeah, yeah. So,
That's kind of cool. Okay, yeah. I'll give him that.
Brett Favre, familiar? His first NFL pass was a pick six. His first ever completion was to himself.
Okay, the first... I get the first one. The second one, what do you mean?
He threw the ball and it got blocked and bounced up into the air and he caught it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like...
Very
I guess,
rare. It happens.
It happens. Yeah. I guess, like, I don't know. Kind of sounds like the beginning of his career kind of, like, was an omen for the end of his career, too.
Yeah. In 1970, kicker Tom Dempsey held the record of 63-yard field goal. He had no toes on his kicking foot.
I actually did know that one. That one is the... Yeah, they have an episode about that guy on Secret Base. Pretty interesting. I remember hearing it. He wore, like, a special boot that was kind of like a big nub, and a lot of people, like, it was controversial because they thought that
it was giving him
extra
an
surface
advantage.
area, it was giving him the extra push, which, like,
Probably.
yeah, probably, yeah.
But I mean, he had no toes. Come on.
Yeah, come on, give him a break. And also,
He had specialized equipment because of a disability. Like,
and you know what? His legacy is gone now anyway. We have a new record kick, so
yeah,
we even
exactly,
need a
Fuck Tom Dempsey.
the official stance of this podcast.
In 1974, Joe Theismann was Washington's leading punt returner.
Sorry, I'm trying to process that. How?
He received punts. I don't know what to tell you.
Why was he on the special team?
I know, that's the real question. Why was he out there?
This is why I'm so confused.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting, unbelievable stat for a reason.
Yeah, you know what? He's really just a jack of all trades, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
In 2002, there was a game between the Steelers and the Texans where the Steelers outgained in total yardage 422 to 27.
27.
Sorry. The yardage total was 422 to 47.
To 47.
The Steelers lost 24 to 6.
I was waiting for the kick in the nuts. They lost what?
24 to 6.
I don't understand how that could possibly happen. Like, the most incredible special teams work you've ever seen, or the most awful special teams work you've ever seen, depending how you take it.
All of Houston's points came on defense. So it was a defensive fumble return, an 70-yard return, and a 65-yard return, plus a field goal. But yeah.
Okay, so that's beginning to make more sense.
But yeah,
It's still an insane
a
game.
40-yard fumble, a 70-yard interception, and then a 65-yard interception.
I mean, isn't it Aaron Rodgers who earlier in this episode said that stats don't matter?
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, I have in 1943, the Steelers and Eagles rosters were so depleted from World War II that they merged teams and were called the Steagles.
Okay, that's honestly sick as hell. Bring it back. What do you mean? Steagles?
Bring back the Steagles.
Bring back. That's new #1 jersey.
I was just
100%.
about to say.
100%. The
up there.
Steagles,
Yeah.
unbelievable stuff.
Yeah, great shit. But yeah, stats. Those.
Yeah,
and the
stats.
NFL is full of fucked up shit.
Yeah,
I
free the
don't know.
Steagles.
Free the Steagles.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode.
You can find us on Twitter at FB Conspiracies, where we will post all the graphics and links we spoke about during this episode.
You can also reach us by email using fbconspiracies@gmail.com.
A special thanks to Blaze for the music.
If you enjoyed, consider leaving a review.
Join us next week for more football conspiracies.
These so it was Fruit Loop cubes and Cinnamon Toast Crunch cubes, and we were going ape shit over these things. And then when we walked through this door, there was this weird magical door, and as you walked through it, it brought you to Wahanoan, which is just insane. It was next level ridiculousness. But yeah, I just remember all of us just going just hog wild on these cube cereals.
That's so funny.